Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup, day 19 of the United Auto Workers strike. We are in Centerline, Michigan, right in front of the Mopar parts and distribution plant, that is Stellantis. And I'm glad to be able to talk to some retirees. Obviously, the focus has been on the current workers and their needs, but it's a whole lot of retirees that built these companies and, really built the middle class. That have gone with a significant slash in their pensions and benefits over the last 10 to 20 years. So I am here with Clarice, sorry, my brain is fried. Clarice and Frank, and you both come from GM. Mm-hmm. How long did you work for GM?
19 years until my hands got just so bad I couldn't open and close them. So
yeah, I'm talking to so many people here, even young people. Carpal tunnel.
In fact, it was less than that, actually less than that, but the treatment took forever, ever. And I'm still, not able to do what I could do when I was younger. So.
Right. And Frank, how about you? How long did you
Oh, I'm sorry. I worked on my plant 20 years. I was a 32-year GM employee.
Absolutely. And, obviously the focus right now, you got longer term workers, 30 years still on the job. They've expressed to me they're really doing this for the next generation and the tier system. So everybody has, equal pay. Everybody's kind of in it together. But at the same time, these companies, they seem allergic to even mentioning the word pension. And they want to do away with really what made these jobs attractive in the first place, which was retirement security. Can you let us know what were you able to get, working years ago, the pension, the benefits, and what have they contributed to that over the last 10 or 20 years?
Well, we were put into the VEBA because I think it was General Motors that started agitating, saying, well, we're going to open our books to you and we're not able to carry you on medical benefits. So they came up with a formula where the big three did contribute and build the medical trust. And that's how I get my benefits.
So VEBA is some kind of not really a pension, but a weird healthcare system?
It's a medical healthcare system that we maintain. After it was created under one of the contracts, so they could get out from under our medical care. And basically, when you have retirees that have been retired 30 years, it's up there 15, 30 years. When you first retire, even if you have your aches and pains, life is pretty good. But then 4 years down the road, we keep hearing of people, the air was so contaminated, coming down cancers, because a lot of the things in the air were carcinogenic.
In the factory?
In the factory. And I can remember one time that I was on a huge machine, and I had called out Frank. Frank was in negotiations at that time on the shop contract. And the air was so dirty coming off of that machine, and fires were starting at the different stations and things like that. And it was because even though I believe the contract said that they had to maintain that machine according to the manufacturer's standards and changing the filters, and they wouldn't do it. We're talking about a minimal cost. And I can also remember times, I was in ergonomics, when the company would transgress an OSHA ruling and just shrugged off the fine. They didn't care how much they paid in fines. They paid them, and the settlement would be on a board right in front of us if it was in our plant. So you could see, well, this infraction in those days, $50,000, that infraction, $75,000. They just didn't. They had all kinds of money for fines.
Just the price of doing business. We'll pay the fine.
At the expense of my health and the others. People have died horrible deaths. Just, you can imagine somebody getting lung cancer or something like that. And even when I received my injury, they as much as indicated to me, well, you worked in ergonomics for a while, so you probably, in other words, you know what to say. But the thing was, I couldn't open and close my hands. So I had lost control of them. To this day, I still sort of lose control of them. And there's no real surgery to fix this.
And is the system you're on for the health care, because you hear so much, this is the gold standard health care plan, it's the best you could get, is what they're giving retirees the best you could get health care wise?
I think that it's adequate, but there are a lot of people that retired, and Frank probably knows more about this than I do, where if the injury is payable through workers' comp, a lot of my retirees as they age don't have the wherewithal to do this paperwork and know just what to do when. So that's big, and of course a corporation's not going to help them. So all I can do is ask people, my retirees, to stay as close to their union as they can. We just had a benefits meeting that was rather well attended. But they feel bad. My retirees feel bad because, look at my little button here, my local should have been 60 years old this year, but it was shut down. The corporation closed the plant. They dwindled it down to nothing. Consequently, we have a lot of retirees. Median age for my retirees must be quite high. And just to see them getting sicker and who can't come because they can't drive anymore, or who needs a caregiver. I mean, it's just sad. It's just sad.
And these aren't, the things you're talking about, these aren't really things that are so expensive they couldn't have remediated. The environmental stuff, the air contamination, they could have spent money at these plants to keep you safe, and they would still make plenty of money. Is that correct?
I can remember where you couldn't see through the mist. You just couldn't see through it. So, horrible.
So health and safety was always a constant struggle, and it was always the company's denialism that there's no problem here, and the workers would say, "Oh yeah, feel my wrist," or "I'm breathing in coolant mist." Mm-hmm. We actually brought in Harvard University to do a chemical study on the coolants, and it took that kind of outside interference to try to make some changes in the plant, and we had deaths in the plant due to the practices were not maximum. So we had a very popular worker in our plant that was crushed under a coil of steel because the way the coils of steel were stored were not foolproof. So we had some unnecessary deaths. Every death was unnecessary in our factory. And I want to say, to the credit of our union, we probably had some of the best health and safety representation that any union worker could have possibly have hoped for. I dealt with them personally, and we managed to change practices and make it a safer plant as a result.
Let me, by the way, remember folks, we've been on the ground for 19 days, as the workers could tell you, as the retirees could tell you. It's pretty hot out, okay? We've been in Ohio, we've been in Canada, we've been in Chicago, we've been all over Michigan. John behind the camera has been here the whole time. Tina replaced me for a few days, now I'm back. It's very expensive, and we are not CNN, we don't have their resources, and we're not owned by a multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerate. I don't think you're going to hear these stories in depth on national or local news. Please support this reporting. It's very expensive. StatusCoup.com/join. All I ask is 16 cents a day. That's what $5 a month equates to. Sign up, $5 a month, StatusCoup.com/join. Let me ask you about the pension system. Obviously, since you guys worked for 20, 30 years or so, you got a pension. Did they cut your pension after the financial crash? Tell us about what happened with the pension.
I think the most important number that you can take away from this interview is that a worker who retired in 2008, let's say, their pension is, the value of the pension is 28% less than what they got in 2008. So with the ravages of inflation, retirees have really felt the impact and seen no raises in their pensions. There's no cost of living allowance, for example, on the pensions.
That's right.
And pensioners are really strung out about these negotiations and hoping that the negotiations will result in changes, positive changes for them in regards to their pensions. And of course, they look at the current active workers and realize they're not even going to get a pension under current conditions unless that's negotiated away into a pension system. So it's really a situation where, by virtue of the bankruptcy and the bailout, that the workers have been divided. Younger workers can look at the retirees and say, well, you got a pension. What are you complaining about? And the pensioners can say, yeah, but look what's happening to our pensions. We appeal to you to help us get that changed. So it's a contradiction. It's an antagonism that's been created that we did not experience when we were working. And so even pensioners will tell you, we used to get a Christmas bonus, and that was taken away.
Right.
And you might think that's a small thing, but in the hearts of retirees who anticipated the Christmas bonus every year, it's gone, and they're hurting. They feel it.
Let me ask you, because, I mean, it's not like Social Security is making anybody rich. Medicare is obviously good, but, I mean, for older people in this country, unless you come from generational wealth, a lot of them are struggling. Has it been tough for you, even with the pension, with inflation and things like that?
You can't beat the time value of money. I mean, you can't beat inflation. I mean, if you want to eat, you got to pay that bill. And bringing up the Christmas bonus, my retirees are just livid about that. A lot of us were able to pay our taxes with that. I mean, it wasn't that big, but it was just enough. I know I paid my tax. I have a smaller home, but it gave me the pride of home ownership. That's what I worked for all these years. It's what my retirees are working for. I mean, they weren't planning on getting cancer and all these other debilitating rheumatoid arthritis and all these other things that were connected to their jobs. They thought that if they could just stick it out, they'd have a great retirement, enjoy their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren if possible, and look at what's happening. I mean, they really have to watch their pennies.
And I think particularly this line of work, I mean, I don't have the data, but I would have to assume the overwhelming majority need the health care when they retire because they have, whether it's physical or what it is, just the nature of the job, injuries related to being an auto worker.
Yes. There's a lot of cumulative injuries. You know, you don't know you're being injured, and then one day you can't bend your knee, you can't walk right. I mean, I can remember seeing people that were older than I am, and I mean, they would come on that job every day. They could barely walk then. And it wasn't unusual, you know, in like our little luncheonette where where we get food out of the vending machines and things like that, and a little bit of coffee. There were all these chairs, and certain people sat in certain chairs. You would just walk in, and so-and-so would be sitting there, and it constantly was happening. They go, oh, didn't you know he had a heart attack over the weekend and died? Or, yeah, her cancer came back, and she won't be able to come back to work ever. And then, you know, you hear a month later that they were dead. And, you know, it's just horrible. I mean, they need a little bit more. They need more money, a little bit more money, a lot of money. They need more money on their pensions. So, I'm hoping. You know, Sean Fain said that he was looking at the situation with the retirees, and that things for the retirees we were led to believe are on the table. You know, and I believe him. I trust in him, and he's really done a great job so far. And I just hope he's able to continue. He's really turned us around. He really has.
Let me ask you, I mean, this is a broader question, but I don't know, the more people I talk to, back in the day when you guys were younger at these jobs, this was kind of the dream job if you're from this area. You know, a lot of people wanted to work at GM or Ford or Chrysler because the great pay, the benefits, you could make, it's kind of the American dream, you know?
Can you get me in?
Right, can you get me in? What changed? Because the company seemed back then to, I mean, of course, greed always existed, but at least they wanted to incentivize workers with these kind of benefits and things like that. How did we get here where, you know, they rip everything away from you, claiming we're not going to survive if you don't give it back? They promise we'll give it back, and now they're crying, we'll go under if they give it back. Is it just greed? What's going on?
So I think that with the certainly with the bankruptcy bailout, but well before that, the corporations were going to a different model, and the only thing that was stopping them from going to a different model was the UAW. We have to realize that back when I was back in the plant in 1979, we had 1.5 million members. We had 425,000 workers at GM. We were powerful. We exercised muscle. And we're down to 50,000, I think, at GM now. The three companies combined is 150,000 workers. We're in a different state of our existence. We, back in the 50s, 1 in 3 auto workers, or 1 in 3 workers was unionized. And today it's less than 10%. So the whole drive of capitalism has been to deny us these protections and to deny us these rights. And through things like the bankruptcy restructuring with the help of the U.S. government intervention, many of the things that we exercised as rights were taken away, including the right to strike for like 4 or 5 years, which is extraordinary. So I think that this process, and along with that, we had a leadership that thought that they bought into the Kool-Aid about jointness and, we're in this together, we're a team concept, and we're all going to make out, this is all going to be win-win.
You mean the UAW leadership who bought into the Kool-Aid of, the companies and the workers we're in this together and we need to...
We have to be competitive, up to, but it was really another way of, that was class warfare. But it was,
we've lost. So
right, and it was the sugar, right? It wasn't the stick, it was the carrot, right? And, they looked the other way because in the meantime, a dozen of them were putting money in their pockets that didn't belong to them.
Right.
And they really, really lost their way. And so I think those are some of the things of what accounts for where we are today. I just want to say that on the question of workplace injuries, this is a mode of existence for GM workers, all auto workers. And, we hear about workers are willing to sustain through all these injuries because it's a job. But the companies, like in situations like in other countries, like whether it be Mexico, whether it be Colombia, workers who are routinely injured on the job are fired and lose their work, and they don't get workers' comp. So in the whole scheme of things, this is their way they operate. It's like Amazon wanting to operate with workers that might last 3 or 4 years. At GM, maybe they might last 10. But it's a new model. They don't anticipate that they're going to be paying. They're going to have seniority workers that are going to be there 30 years. It's not going to work that way. But I think that, as Clarice was saying, that with New Kids on the Block and the leadership, as a result of a reform movement that's been working year after year to make changes in the UAW, that I feel for the first time workers are feeling this hope.
Right.
And the resentment is coming out and the hope is filtering in, and they're willing to do this strike because they believe that the leadership isn't just cycling them through a strike just to get them to accept more concessions. Right. Workers are really saying, these brothers, Sean Fain and the sisters like LaShawn English, Margaret Mock, they mean business, and they're saying it and they're putting it out there. And that's why you see workers out here today in the picket lines and saying, we're going to fight, and we're going to fight to get this right.
I think something you said is really important, and you said a date, 1979. And my viewers, you know this, and if you haven't seen it, we'll show it. You look at the chart. It starts in the late 70s, early 80s. Of all the money, that red line going to the top. I don't call it income inequality. I call it a grand bank robbery. They stole our money. And then you look from that same date, union participation diving down. Yep. The two are connected. Yep. You had back in, 70s, 60s, 70s, a vibrant labor in this country. that was the only real leverage or protections you had. And year by year, and then on steroids with Reagan, they just took a battering ram to organize labor, special interest, the Republican Party. I think the Democratic Party helped them. And it's not a coincidence that we've gone from, I mean, it was never completely economic equality, certainly not for black people, brown people, but at least the CEO maybe made 15 times the worker. Now it's 350 to 400 times. So I think they knew, the special interests, the companies, they knew if we destroy the unions, we could do whatever we want to seniors and the current workers. Do you feel like that concept of greed is good, let's batter organized labor, do you think part of this strike is about trying to reverse that?
Yes, definitely. In fact, I was on my Facebook page, I said to my retirees just yesterday, what do you, in your memory, was one of the worst concessions or sacrifices that you've made over the years? And one came back with, and I had forgotten about this, that after the bankruptcy, General Motors made the non-represented whole, but not us. And there were other things like, well, just look at the damage that something like the tier system has done. It's time, that's got to go. There's no two ways about it. I mean, it's caused a lot of problems between the workers on the floor. I mean, they can't have that. And whoever heard of a temporary worker with 5 years? You're temporary for 5 years? Well, apparently they really need you. That's got to go.
Well, it used to be you started a company, maybe you have a 30 to 60 day probationary period and then 90 day. Now, I mean, I talked to a worker between getting laid off and hired back. He was temp for 10 years. And then when he got hired full time, he somehow was getting paid less. Yes. I mean, that is a purposely convoluted system, I think, to pit workers against each other.
Absolutely. I think it's very anti-union, and I'm glad that, the younger people that are taking over, like LaShawn English is my regional director. She's the first woman ever to hold that position. And I was just thinking, like, that shouldn't be a novelty. I mean, these positions, and she's just so progressive and so pro-worker. She's out of Chrysler, and she was showing me, I couldn't even keep up with her when she was explaining to me how jagged their pay schedule is for a new worker, and a newer worker. It depends on how you came in. So, I mean, how can you get to the maximum if you're not even a real employee? I know you're represented, but for some reason it's come to mean less under that system. It has to go. It's anti-union.
Let me ask you, Frank. You've been through the battles. You know the local media, you know the national media. I don't know. I don't remember seeing any coverage or outrage when these companies are doing $500 million of stock buybacks. I don't see CNBC or Jim Cramer melting down over that. I don't see any of the national media blinking an eye when Mary Barra is making $29 million a year. That is accepted. That is the norm. But now, what you're hearing in the media is just the regurgitation of talking points. Pensions are a thing of the past. That's not realistic now. Well, why are the things I just described realistic? That they could spend all this money on juicing up their stock, that they could, $30 million a year. Is Mary Barra that gifted? Is she that, definitive to the bottom line? Where has the media been over the last 30 years as they've been basically rigging the system against workers?
They've been sitting on the same executive boards of these corporations. They intermingle, right? So they think, oh, that's good for them, that's good for us. It's a corporate media. So the corporations are, of course, their responsibility is to get out the corporate message and normalize the idea that Mary Barra can make $29 million in 1 year. And by the way, the Institute for New Economic Thinking actually pegs that number as higher. And I'll be happy to share that with you. It's actually more than 29 million. Yeah. So, but anyway, so they normalize it, and their instrument is to tell the public, this is the way it is. This is normal. That's great. And what's really interesting to me, and you're right, you know, this is the way things are. What's interesting to me is how much mass media and along with the corporations have gotten caught up short with the advent of this strike, because all of a sudden they're having to spill the beans about, well, you know, they're really right. You know, the conditions in these factories are really not that great, you know. And so even the mass media has been forced to educate the public, communicating the message of the picket line, and Sean Fain going on live streaming the message, a class conscious message to the media. So the media has even been set back. So, you know, all of a sudden it's really educating the public. The public is paying more attention. There's greater support for the strike. I think it's like 75% of the U.S. public. So it's like an undoing of the narrative in spite of themselves. And they're having to deliver the message. So I think things are actually looking pretty good compared to what corporate media, you know.
Let me ask you, because I see it all the time. We see it in the comments under our video. You know, I think they're kind of, not, you know, jerk-offs. But they say, hey, if it's so hard, if you're getting so injured, if you're so miserable, go find another job.
I see it too.
Well, maybe back in the day there were a lot of other options. But now, I mean, I don't think one worker has told me, yeah, there's other great union jobs around here where I could get good pay and a little easier on my body. For this generation, do you think it's so easy to just find something better that pays you the same with strong benefits?
Not if you want to live in the state of Michigan. The corporations closed, what, 65 plants in 20 years. Now, we're just talking about our plants. We're not talking about all our suppliers, all our little neighborhood suppliers. I mean, they damaged this economy, is what they did. They didn't care. And people will say, you know, when I think of the intense loyalty to buying what you make, driving what you make or made. I mean, you come in our lot when we have a retirees meeting and you'll see bow tie, bow tie, bow tie, bow tie, a couple Cadillacs, bow tie. I mean, they really are proud of what they made. They're proud of their work, and they deserve that pride. They earn that and a lot more.
They built the middle class.
And continue to do what little they can. I mean, they're always saying, well, I think I can get a new car next year, or they'll come, they know that I'm leasing right now, and they'll go, hey, you know, where'd you get your lease from? How much are you paying? Because they still want the new car. They want to go out and drive another bow tie. You know, and what do they get for their loyalty? What, you want more money? Well, you're getting more money. And you're allowed to, correct me if I'm wrong, but once they get stock options, the higher ups, I mean, don't they just use that to their own personal benefit?
Yeah.
I mean,
buying back the stock is directly related to how much the CEOs make. So the higher the stock price goes, their salary and you know, stock options go better.
You know, and here, my retirees are really asking for, I don't want to get upset, but really asking for so little. Compared to, I mean, they had jobs that really, to tell you the truth, ruin the quality of their life. And yes, you have health care, but I know people that go to the doctor 2 and 3 times a week, you know, for treatment, various treatments on this or that. That's a quality life. You know, and when you balance that against their intense loyalty and pride of what they made and how they've survived, you know, they deserve more money on pensions, and those that are working, and the tiers, and the temps. It's in a union. It's union busting. It's just our people deserve more.
And that's got to be really mentally tough in your golden years. If you're going to the doctor 2 or 3 times a year, people coming down with cancer, then you're told, you're not getting your Christmas bonus this year. Your pension is nosediving in value. Maybe you can't get your grandkids as many gifts. Maybe you know. You can't enjoy, I don't know, a modest, you know, 1-week vacation. It's got to be mentally tough after slaving away for 30, 40 years in your retirement to be dealing with that.
I can't stand when we're portrayed as people that got too much. Oh, look at them, they can buy a newer house, or oh, look at them, they've got a newer car. I don't think they understand what it was like working there. And these people that say, go get a job somewhere else. Where else? These corporations got rid of everything. You can't even go to a supplier. You can't go to a tool shop. They're closed. Why? It all comes back to the so-called big three. You know, you can't close 65 plants in 20 years. I mean, you've ruined the economy.
Well, I will also say, whatever your politics are, doesn't matter to me. They didn't do it on their own. The government allowed it. The government, I mean, Ford just got a $9.2 billion loan from the government, no strings attached. They didn't get that money with a requirement that if you're building those battery plants, they have to be union plants. So the government, I mean, they basically let the corporations write NAFTA. So they closed these plants. They closed these plants because the government has allowed corporations to offshore with no penalty. In my view, because the governments have been bought by the same corporations. Your thoughts?
Let's talk tax abatements.
Yes.
I mean, they asked us at what I think it was called no, it wasn't Hydromatic at the time. They had changed their name to Powertrain already. And they asked us to please come with them to the City of Warren City Council meeting and support their tax abatement.
Yeah.
Yes. And we did it. And look what they did. Yeah. They closed our plant.
Right.
I mean, talking about being joint and having the same interests and supporting each other, my retirees did whatever they could and trusted that it would work out for us. And what happened? Let me tell you, our plant was totally refurbished, plant to ceiling, and I think at the end, 20% was operating?
Yeah.
It was sold as a blighted property.
Right.
I mean, clean and new, floor to ceiling. Sold as a blighted property, really? And then what happened? Somebody bought it, knocked it down. So, what justice is there? Where does it end? I mean, we did everything we were asked to do, and it just isn't working for us. You know?
Remember, folks, I need you to smash the like button. You're not going to see these type of interviews in the corporate media, that's for sure. And if you do, they'll be cut down to 20 seconds and twisted. Smash the like button, share this live stream, and please, for the love of God, please support us. This is day 19. We want to stay out here, but, I mean, we've already spent in almost 3 weeks, almost $8,000 between myself, Tina, John, hotels, rent-a-car, food, flights. It's very expensive. That's why most of the media doesn't do this kind of reporting across the country, and they're lazy. So, StatusCoup.com/join. You could join us for $5 to $10 a month. $5 a month is 16 cents a day. If you don't have that, that's okay. If you do, sign up, StatusCoup.com/join. Let me ask you just, I remember in 2019 covering the GM strike, and I was at your local union hall, and it was just a beautiful thing. Solidarity, people were singing. This is not just about a job. This is about community. That's part of working for these companies. Maybe Ford and them say it's a family and then treat you, abuse you. But for the workers, it really is like a family. Do you see that kind of dissipating the more struggle these workers today? I mean, the people I'm talking to, they barely have time to see their family. It seems like what it used to be, it is not like that as much today.
So I think you're touching on a very important point that it was always very close to my heart. Our plant was, I'd say, about 40% African American, Detroiters. We were right on the border between Detroit and the suburbs, and at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, or at the end of the day, a lot of the workers coming out of the gates drove north. They were mostly white. The drivers coming south were mostly black. But in that plant, we had a community of black and white solidarity that has been lost with each plant closure. Right. Because that's where we came together, and those differences or those issues, by and large, they didn't go all together away, but they were diminished to the point that we had solidarity as workers. And the fact of our plant, not only did we lose jobs, but we lost that sense of community with each other and that sense of unionism that even though we had differences, and boy, there were many differences at 909, if you look today on the Facebook page of 909 members, they are so incredibly fond of the memories of our community and our togetherness as workers. It was like a village for us. And that's been lost. And with every, nobody talks about that, but with every, destruction of like our plant, the media doesn't talk about what was lost.
Right.
It's just money, it's just dollars and cents. But they're destroying a community fabric that we don't now regain. And I think I'm glad that you touched on that, because that is one of the salient features of our factory.
I mean, listen, I got a 10-month-old. I'm very fearful because every kid I see is on their phone instead of talking to people, So this was not just a job. This was a way to connect families, bridge divides between race, gender, you name it. And now, I mean, the modern day workers, but they're just trying to survive. And honestly, from the sounds of it, a lot of seniors that are having cuts. Real quick before we end, let's talk about the evolution of the UAW. Obviously, people know about the corruption and embezzlement and things like that. But even putting aside that, even when UAW leaders were not corrupt, they were complacent, in my view. Mm-hmm. Now you have this new leadership. Not everyone. I've seen a lot of people want all the plants out at once. But by and large, most workers I've talked to like the current strategy of, let's not drain the strike fund right away. Let's keep the companies guessing. But as retirees, do you feel re-energized with this new leadership? Because I've never seen a union leader this communicative. Mm-hmm. Usually negotiations were in secret. Nobody knew what was going on.
That's right.
Do you like this new leadership and this strategy?
So in speaking to other workers on picket lines, to speaking to friends who are retirees, I was just at a friend's house that we were back in 909. We haven't seen each other in a while, and he loves what he's seen. And I think that it's energized not only UAW members. Another conversation I had with somebody that worked at Kroger. They were in the break room. Sean Fain is on the TV. He's stuffing the Stellantis proposal in the trash can. And the workers in the break room at Kroger's were slapping on the table and hollering. And I'm saying this is a working class phenomenon. And I think that it's grabbed retirees, it's grabbed young workers, it's grabbed the majority of working class people. So they've got the eyes on this. And I think they're feeling like in their hearts a feeling of elevation, and to think of, we are important and we are deserving more than what we have, and we deserve equality, we deserve equal pay for equal work, and I think that's just across the board. So that's what I'm seeing, and I feel for all the years that we've struggled for good leadership, it's kind of like finally we're seeing some of it.
Your thoughts?
Well, this is one thing. We went to a rally at Region 1, and Sean Fain was there, and he said there'll be no more president's demand. And I kind of need Frank's help with this because I've never been to the national bargaining table. I guess the president's demands were referring to the time at beginning of negotiations when the president of the UAW would go to the corporations and talk about his demands. And Sean stopped that. He now calls them, he doesn't go in by alone, it's just him and the corporation. It's an open setting, and they're called the workers' demands, as they should have always been. So little by little, when he speaks, I learned something. And I think that I am so grateful for the tack that he has taken. It's bringing us back. I don't hear my retirees talking about illegal things that happened in the past anymore. They are looking to the future, and we deserve a future.
Absolutely.
Wow. I went to pay my property taxes recently in the North End, and wasn't trying to get comment or anything, but I went in on the second from the last day, and I was wearing my shirt, my red shirt, and I wore it to silently say, hey, I'm amongst you, we're in your community. We live here. And if it weren't for this wheel, there'd be no this. And I had my check firmly grasped in my hand to pay my taxes. You know, if you want that to continue, we have to evolve, and Sean Fain is the man that's going to do it.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So those are two proud UAW GM retirees. Listen, that's what it's about. These kind of interviews really energize me. It's one thing to speak with people through a computer, you know. Obviously we can't be on the road at all times, and when we can't be on the road, I try to interview people, you know, remotely. It's a whole nother thing to look people in the eyes, whether they're, you know, older, younger. It's another thing to have the picket line behind us. It's another thing for it to be burning hot out while you're doing it. It is hot. I'm sweating if you can't notice. It's just another thing to see the mix of the pain, the pride, the anguish, the nostalgia, the joy, the disappointment that you just saw in that interview. There's a lot of conflicting emotions that these workers have. And the thing that really stuck out to me is it's not, obviously the most important thing is whether you could put food on the table for you, your kids. I mean, at the end of the day, we all need food, water, shelter, clothes, you know. But second to that, this was and is many of these people's, a big part of their identity as people. You know, she's saying that coming into retiree events, they're all driving in with GMs and cars that they made, even though the company is treating them like disposable parts, pun intended. So the pride that they have for what they did, even though the company is taking their Christmas bonus away if you're a retiree, cutting their pension, watering down their health care, they still have pride and they still love the company. And the loss of community that Frank touched on. The fact that when these plants closed, so does the community, because people leave. You know, people can no longer find employment, so they leave the community, and the once full union halls are no longer full, and relationships end, and relationships grow distant. I mean, that's deep. You know, we're all, whether you're a retiree, not a young person, it doesn't matter. We all need more than just work in our life, right? We need connection, whether it's friendship, a romantic connection, whatever it is. We need some form of connection. That's what helps us live and feel purposeful and be happy. You know, I always talk to my wife, who, you know, obviously I love, but I always say, you know, I don't just want to go out on the ground. You know, we have a young child, so it's not easy for me to be out on the ground all the time. And obviously I want to be home to be a father. But I say to my wife, for me, part of my purpose is to be out there, you know, with the people and to be learning from the people and to be lifting their voices. It's not just a job to me. It is my purpose. It is where I feel most useful and where I feel in many ways, you know, most alive. I like, you know, it's not that I don't like doing live streams from home, but if you gave me the choice, I'd be doing this every day. And it's very tiring and it's very depressing a lot of the time I'm out here. But that's part of my connectivity, right? Well, for these workers, a lot of their identity was being on the shop floor with their fellow workers and being in the union hall with their fellow workers. And I'm sure going out to dinner with their fellow workers and their families and people then, you know, your kids are on the same sports team or whatever it is. And a lot of that has been lost because these companies are greedy, soulless corporate villains that have purchased your government. So I hope you're getting that, because that's what I'm getting from being out here. And as I've said for a long time, you know, I'm not telling you not to vote. I'm not telling you electoral politics don't matter. But what I am telling you is I think if this rotten system that we have, which is capitalism, I believe if this corrupt system we have, which is basically not really a government, it's just basically puppets being pulled by their strings are being pulled by the corporations that bought them. We don't have a government, we have a system of legalized bribery is what we have. If any of that is going to change, I don't really think it's dramatically going to change from who we elect. I think it's going to change from workers fighting back. And really the only thing, the main source you have as a worker to fight back is unions. That's just the history of America. And it did not always include, by the way, black people and brown people and indigenous people. The middle class really never included. I mean, not that there wasn't, you know, black people or brown people or indigenous people ever part of the middle class, but by and large, white people benefited the most and have always benefited the most. And that's part of the original sin of this country. But I think the only way to really start chipping away at kind of this social Darwinism and everybody's out for everybody, you know, out for yourself, and this Ayn Rand, you know, 1980s Wall Street, greed is good mentality, is to fight back. And the way to do that is unions. And again, the chart clearly shows it. When income was a little bit more equal in this country, the 1950s, 60s, some of the 70s, you had very strong labor unions and you had high labor union participation. The percentage of unionized workers was a lot higher. Look at the bank robbery, the workers, our money getting stolen to the top, that chart flying up and that chart flying down. As the money went up, unions went down. It's not complicated. Again, I'm going to ask one more time. I'll take off my glasses. And you see the sweat. Please, please, please. I'm not asking for my health, and I'm not asking because I'm greedy. I'm asking because I don't know. I'm sorry if it sounds like a broken record, but it is very expensive to be out here as long as we've been. It's expensive to be out for a week, let alone we're going on almost 3 weeks. I started this trip with John on day 1 of the strike. I left, I think, on day 6. Tina replaced me. John's been here the whole time. I'm leaving soon. And we want to stay out here. And sometimes it's going to be repetitive because you hear a lot of the same things from workers. And I can't reinvent the wheel and ask all new questions because a lot of the questions are the same questions. But I think the repetition is good. I think it's good to hear from as many workers as possible, even if you're hearing similar stories, because you're hearing similar stories, but with different shades, if that makes sense. So please, please support us if you can. You know, there's a lot of content out there, and most of it's junk. It's like food, you know? There's a lot of food out there, and most of it's junk. And I know we like our junk food. I sure do. But I, as humbly as I could say it, I don't know any other outlet in this country that does what we do. I don't know any other outlet that covers the amount that we cover, the breadth that we cover, not just union stuff, across the board. Flint, East Palestine, all the stuff we've covered, homelessness, economic exploitation, with so little resources. We don't have a corporate fat cat funding us. We're not funded by banks, fossil fuel companies, big pharma, real estate companies, Silicon Valley, military defense contractors, big donors to either party. We don't have any of that money. That's why I keep drilling $5 a month. If you can, $10 a month. We have different membership plans. You could go statuscoup.com/join and pick the one you could afford. But if we keep getting about 15 to 20 new members a day, I believe we'll be able to stay out here longer. If you're already a member, thank you for signing up. You could also donate to help support this reporting. That's statuscoup.com/donate. And if you want updates on when we're going to be live, what we're doing, that's our Substack. That's statuscoup.substack.com. You can sign up for free there, statuscoup.substack.com. Thanks.